Most of these webinars will be live on the website, but before going there, I'd like to make a few introductory points on what is that WAPPS-Hemo addresses. And I want also to disclose that Leo reminded you, I'm the PI of WAPPS-Hemo. That means, of course, I'm biased toward how good the product is. And WAPPS-Hemo is funded by a multitude of sources. We had some seed funding from the Association of Hemophilia Center Director of Canada back in 2012 and 2013. We are now receiving also support from the Canadian Institute of Health Research for a testing study we are running. And we also get unrestricted funds or fee for service from many pharma companies. You see them listed on the screen. This all goes to support the provision of the service, the update of the software, the hosting, and so on. This is what I'm going to touch on today. After really a few minutes of introduction on what is that is needed to bring a PK and population PK tailoring to the point of care, I want to go over step by step how you use WAPPS, because, you know, having a clearer idea of what it is that it does is possibly the best way to understand its value and talk about it, or, you know, answer questions, advise colleagues willing to seeking information, and so on. So I will touch quickly on what is needed to register a center, register a patient, input the PK study, receive and interpret the result, use the calculator to create a treatment regimen, do a validation step, activate myWAPPS, the patient app that we have developed, and use the dashboard to see how our patients are doing when on population PK tailored prophylaxis. Now, I want to point out to the last version of the WFH guidelines on the management of hemophilia. I show here the authors. I was not involved. I mean, I work closely with the World Federation, but I was not involved in this specific effort. And the reason I'm citing it is because the WFH guidelines, they suggest that the goal of prophylaxis now is to prevent bleeds at all times. And if you were to go into the details, it says that prophylaxis is not anymore targeting 1% as a trough, but is targeting the trough that is needed to prevent bleed in each individual patient. And the level you target may be different depending the activity the patient is willing to achieve, which leads to the recommendation 631, where it says that prophylaxis should be made, should be tailored to the individual, made on each one patient in its proper way, taking into consideration the bleeding phenotype, the joint status, and individual pharmacokinetics, plus, of course, how the patient judge is doing and preferences in terms of goals and so on. So individual pharmacokinetics is now the mainstream way to go with prophylaxis, and is not only spelled out in general, but it says that you really need to do a minimal PK evaluation of patient and then adjust dose and frequency based on individual PK. And the recommendation is to do this minimal PK assessment using a tool like WAPPS-Hemo. And I will tell you in a second why I believe WAPPS-Hemo is the tool that WFH recommends as the first choice. Not that the UK CDO organization is recommending anything different. More or less the same words, and again, recommending use of WAPPS WAPPS-Hemo or other tools. I guess that the main reason why WAPPS-Hemo is recommended as the go-to place for individualized treatment is that it serves all concentrates. It's not brand specific, it's not linked to any single company, and it has now published models on over 27 factor 8 and a handful of factor 9 concentrate, both traditional, extended half-life, and moving into the newest. And so that's one reason. And the other is that it's a very a simple tool to use and is free for all. Now, why is that we need to tailor to the individual? Is because if you give the same dose, say 50 units per kg, to a population of patients, you have a very, very different factor level post-infusion. So the dose that the patient may need to get to a pre-specified 100% peak or 5% trough is very, very different. The lucky one, they follow the green line, they get very high, and then they decay very slowly. The unlucky one, they can get a very minimal peak and be free of any residual factor activity in really few hours. And there's a huge variability in between. The individual PK profiling aims at getting to know where the patient sits, each individual patient, between the green and the red line. And I'm showing you a population on one specific concentrate, but you could have similar graph on each one of the product on the market. There is no product currently on the market that has no variability patient to patient. That means saying that prophylaxis is 20 to 40 units per kg of factor 8 for everyone is essentially meaningless. For someone, 20 is too much. For someone, 40 is too little. And the frequency 2 to 3 times per week, again, is really a ballpark. Someone may need only once a week, someone else may need daily. Now, the ISDH, before WFH, but now WFH as well, recommend doing a population PK study. So essentially they say, sure, you can't do an 11 data point PK. That's too cumbersome for clinical practice, is unpractical, patient can't do it, you can't draw 11 sample in a little child and so on. So do population PK, draw 1, 2, 3 samples anytime you can after an infusion, after more than one infusion, use those samples to get the best guess of the individual PK of patient. Now, this is not magic, even if it looks like magic. And I want to show you why ISDH and now all the other society suggest to use population PK. If you have only 3 points and you try to draw a line, you may not be able to, because if you take into account error and all the differences, you may be on the red line or the green line, and you will not know which one is true. If you had 11 data points, yes, you could join all the points and get the proper line that represent the patient PK, but you only have a few samples and maybe not even so well spaced like in my example, you might be left with some doubt. That doubt is filled by using additional information about variability. What we know about who's usually better, who's usually worst, what is the random error of measurement, and what is the space, the expected distance between the red and the green. So if I'm trying to make this extra simple for you to understand what is that WAPPS does in the backend, say we take the average individual in the population. So patient J, let's say, is a human being with hemophilia A, and he uses factor X for treating. That's the average half-life, average PK profile in the population for that concentrate. But if I now add age, weight, BMI, blood group, I take into account the specific characteristics of that patient, I know already before sampling that that patient will be there, because for age, for the BMI and for the blood group, I know that he's on the positive side compared to the gray line. So I expect him to be there. Now, if I take two samples and I know the shape and the approximate place of the curve, I can move that curve to go through those two samples. This is why WAPPS can do a very good approximation of the perfect line for that individual patient with only 2-3 samples, because it builds on the information of the tens of thousands of PK we have done to guess what the shape is, where the approximate place is for that patient, and then 1 or 2 samples are enough to confirm that's the PK for that patient. And of course, and I have just this last concept before I move into showing WAPPS. You can do this in the space of one single visit. So population PK breaks the barrier of the patient not willing to come back to clinic. The blue space, the blue rectangle shows 3 hours in clinic. When the patient gets in clinic, we take a pre-dose, and then we do an infusion. And then we do all what we do, the joint score, the clinical assessment, the patient sees the physiotherapist, the social worker before he goes, and it takes about 3 hours in our setting, we do another sample. Now, if the patient lives close by and is willing to, he can come back the day after or 2 days after, and he get a third sample. We have the pre-dose, the peak, now we have a late sample. But if the patient cannot come back, we can ask him when he did the previous infusion. And if he tells us that he got some concentrate, the amount and the approximate time, it can be approximated to plus minus 2 hours. It doesn't matter. Usually it's 2-3 days before. So 2 hours on a 72-hour period are really very influential. Now we can use the pre-dose twice, because that pre-dose is the pre-dose and it is also the late sample. It also works for 24, 48, or 72 hours, depending when the previous infusion was done. So in 3 hours, by doing 2 samples, pre-dose and peak, and asking the patient when he infused lately, we'll get all what we need for a very precise PK estimate. If you want to see it on the agenda, the patient comes in on the 11th, and we do the pre-dose, the infusion, and a 3-hour sample, and then we ask him when he infused 2 days before. We get the dose and the time, and that enables us to use the pre-dose as a late sample, which is all what we need for a pretty good 80% precise estimate of the half-life. Okay, I'll stop here the PowerPoint presentation, and let's see if I can switch to WAPPS-Hemo. So first of all, let me give you can go on the home page yourself. We are before logging in here, and you see our counters. There are about 600 centers using WAPPS. We have profiled a little short of 10,000 patients, 20,000 PK studies in total, of which about 2,000 in children 6 to 11, 1,500 children 0 to 5, and there are about 500 patients using the myWAPPS app, and they've recorded 40,000 home infusions. And I'll show you what we do with this information. You can also get country by country what the number of centers is. For Japan, there are 16 centers using WAPPS, and there is about 1.3 PK per million people. Now, if you go to Finland, there are 100 PK per million people. 40 pK per million people in Canada, and so on. You can go wherever you are curious, 30 pK in Spain, and so on. So these are our numbers, which to me tells that WAPPS is providing some sort of useful service. Otherwise, busy doctor would not go and use it so intensively. If you are interested in which information do we have, you see here, you know, we have about 4,000 pK on Elocta, 3,000 on Advait, and so on. You can read whatever concentrate you are interested in. 900 on Alprolix, and there are 130 on Refixia, about 100 on Rebinine, and so on. Okay, now for the complete beginner, if you want to register a center, you go on the home page, you click on center registration, and essentially you have to fill out a form where we need to know the center name, what the address is, who's the director, and who's filling the form. It might not be the director, it might be an admin assistant, maybe another doctor in the center, can be a nurse, and then any comment. And then you send a message. So you can't really start until we receive this message. And the only thing we do, we check if the center exists already. Sometimes it's, you know, centers are big and patients are, doctors are rushing through activity, and we get a duplicate request from this for the same center, in which case we will say, listen, that center exists already, and you go to the following step. We also check if the center exists in the WFH passport. And if it does not, we usually do some investigation to make sure that's someone that knows how to treat hemophilia patient. And the reason is that we use the data that are provided. So we don't want to let WAPPS be used by people not knowing what they are doing, because we build better PK on data we receive, and we need to know we only let in people understanding. But the process to register a center is as simple as that. Once the center exists, then the users can register. You add your email, and then you will be asked which center you work on. You pick your center from the list, and an email will go to the administrator of the center that will recognize you and activate you as a user. So really, there's very little work to be done locally. You need to name an administrator, he will receive the email request, and the user will be set up. Now, I don't think it's worth spending more time on how you create a center. I wanted to show you that if someone wants to start on WAPPS, they just need to go here, fill the center registration, or put in their individual email and add themselves to their center. Either us will activate the center, or the center administration will create a new user position within an existing center. Now, let me go in, and I'll go in with a user, with a test user. And you go in is a very, very simple software, not really shiny, not really fancy. You log in, you go in, you see your list of patients. And of course, you can search. The patient will be identified with the number, with the code, with the name. That's completely free. We give a number that is the WAPPS ID. The center can put whatever they want. They can use, this is a fake center. So you see that these are fantasy names, but there could be, you know, health insurance number, hospital number, initials, date of birth, fake numbers, whatever. Of course, whatever is there will be on all the patient documentation. So then to retrieve the patient, you need to know how you name that patient. You see the age, the sex, the blood group, if it's available, the baseline. This is, you know, severe patients are below 1%. And on this page, I only have severe patient. But if I order here, I might have a moderate patient. I don't have in this center, but I might have moderate patient with 5% and so on. I see which factor they are treated with. I see if they have an app activated, and then I have other function here that I will go back in a second. Now, I could access one of the patient I have, but let's see how can I add a new patient. There's a button here, add patient. So let's see what happens if I click on it. I have to define a new patient. So it's male. I have to put a date of birth. We will not show the date of birth anymore. We just show the age. But to avoid duplicates, we require date of birth. If someone, for any reason, is reluctant to put the date of birth, they can put a proxy. So you can say this was born January 1st, 1965. I'm not saying the exact birthday. If I'm allowed, if I have no concern, our data server are very secure, I would suggest you at least put the months. So, you know, month, May the 1st. And if you trust us, you can put the day. This is, by the way, my birthday, just to disclose personal information. Now, when you click out of the field, it says that sadly I'm 56. Now I can give the patient a name. So I will call these test August 2021. I could put anything I want there. Then I have to define the baseline for this patient. So I could say this is a moderate patient with 3%. So the level is equal to 3%. Or if my lab report result as below 1% for severe, I say below 1%. You see here, less than 1%, and I made the patient severe. I have to take responsibility that I've informed that patient I'm entering their data on WAPPS. There is no consent form. This is not research. And we don't need the center to go through ethical. We don't need them to have a consent approved. We just say, please tell your patient to use WAPPS. You are putting minimal set of their information onto the system. But the only thing we need is whoever entering the data, maybe the doctor, maybe the nurse, to check this box. You can add the patient email if you want. You can add the blood group. The blood group is very important. PK is very dependent. You can tell us if the patient had history of inhibitors. The email will only be needed if we activate the patient app. So when I'm happy with the information, I save and the patient is created. Test August 2021. Here is the patient. If I've done a mistake, say it was not a severe, say it was a moderate, I can go back, edit the patient, will reopen the same, and I can change everything. I cannot change the date of birth. If that was wrong, I have to delete the patient, put it back in. But all the rest, I can change anytime. I can change the name, the email, the factor level, and so on. Okay, now I have a patient. What do? Well, usually I add a PK. Now, to show you how to add a PK, so if I go in this patient, there would be nothing. There's an empty chart. Okay, I have the ID that was given to the patient, 49,000 something, the name of the patient, the age, the baseline, the blood group, but I don't have any PK study. So I would need to add a PK study. I prefer to add a PK study to another patient because then we will do some tweaks around it. But ideally, if I go on here, I would do add the PK study and add the PK study. Let me pick another patient. I want, let's see. I want test. Oh, sorry, I know why I don't see my patient because okay, I want this patient here, Michael test 2. Okay, now he has already 2 PKs. We will do a merge later. That's why I want add the PK in a place where I have already some. So let's add the PK study. I had my patient in clinic. I draw my sample. I ask them when they did the previous infusion. Now I have my data on a piece of paper. Now I'm entering the information. So add the PK study. First question is which concentrate? And I will say this is a patient on plasma-derived factor VIII. I have a list. Now, this list is not the list of all the factor concentrate in the universe. At the center level, the center administrator manages the users. So we'll show you how many users are available, active, inactive, if any, and there is a function to add new users. And the administrator can also manage the factor concentrate. So in this center, I have only these ones active. Say now a new one comes available in this area. I could go in and add new concentrate. I would have here a list that is all the list of the concentrate that are managed in WAPPS, and I can say, I don't know, I want to start using will start. I will need to tell what is the test that I usually use, say it's a one stage with a generic standard. When I click on add factor concentrate, this new factor will be available when I go record studies for specific patients. So let's go back to my patient, add the PK study, and now select one of those that I have available in my center. This is to avoid errors. If I only have 3 concentrate available, those are the 3 I will see. So I select plasma-derived factor VIII. It tells me that this is usually measured with one stage, generic. But if for any reason my measurement were done with chromogenic, I can also change it. I can always change it, or I can say that was a drug-specific concentrate. If I was entering an infusion with a extended half-life, he would ask me also for the reagent, and he will guide me to tell, oh, this reagent is an approved one, this reagent is not good with this specific concentrate, and so on. But if I use a simple plasma-derived or standard half-life, usually every reagent is okay. Now I have to put the height of the patient, and this is because the height may change. So you don't put the height in when you create the patient, but when you record the PK study. Body weight, say 78 kilos. How much factor was given? Let's say 2,500 units. It will calculate for me 30 units per kg. When was the infusion done? Let's say it was 2021 and was July the 2nd. Well, let's say July the 10th. At 9 a.m. was in clinic. Oh, sorry. 9 a.m. And the infusion duration was 3 minutes. I can put 0 to say was a bolus. There are covariates that are not mandatory, but you know, if I know that the von Willebrand factor, maybe the antigen on the same sample was, I don't know, 90%, I can add the von Willebrand antigen. It may be used as a covariate. If I don't have, I don't add anything. And when I'm done, and you see that it didn't take long, I save the infusion. Now what happened is that it tells me that the infusion was saved, and I have the infusion here. Now I have the information I provided. So the age of the patient, the height, the weight, the dose that was given, when was given, but I don't have any measurements. So now I have to add the measurements. And so say I took a pre-dose 10 minutes before the infusion, so at 8:50, I took a pre-dose and say that there was no measurable activity, so it was below 1%. I can put notes, or I can just save it as is. So this is my first measurement, was a pre-dose and was below threshold. And then say I took a sample just before the patient went, so let's say 3 hours at noon, and the level at noon was, I don't know, 75%. Oh, okay, so equal to 75%. Now we ask unit per ml. So 75% would be 0.75. In brackets, you see 75%. Now, let's say I don't have anything more. The patient is not coming back. I only know the pre-dose and the peak. So I don't have any more measurement. If I've done a mistake, of course, I can go in, edit the information, was not 75, was actually 76. I can edit anything before I request the PK. You will be able to edit even later, but it will be slightly more complicated. When I'm done, I request the PK. Okay? Now, when I request the PK, here is when I'm asked about prior infusion. Do you know how much the patient infused the time before your infusion in clinic? And I know that he infused 2,500 3 days before. So the study was on the 10th, the 9th, the 8th. On the 7th, he infused 2,500. And he infuses in the morning. And let's say it was about 7 a.m. Okay, so 7 a.m., 3 days before 2,500. Then it tells me, okay, that's all I needed. If you are sure the data you put, save and submit. Now this infusion set with the previous infusion goes to the WAPPS-Hemo engine for estimating a PK. Now it takes a second, and you get a message that says, all good, your data have been checked, your PK has been calculated, just wait for it to be validated. Because I have to say, WAPPS-Hemo is not fully automated. At this point, this PK will be assessed by a human being. And I'm happy to show you what that human being, that is either me or Andrea Edgington, does. So what I do, I log out from here. Now I could show you when one PK is requested, an email is generated. And of course, I don't see it coming while I go. They go in a specific folder, and either myself or Andrea Edgington access that folder, you know, a couple of times per day. We go in and we release all what is pending. Now, I've gone there 5 hours ago. Let's see what is there. Be patient for a second. Oh, there's a message in the chat. Okay. Okay, there are 18 waiting, and you see they come from all over the place. Helsinki, Wales, New York, Imako, this is Japan, Chengdu in China, Shenzhen, Spain, Taiwan, and so on. The last one of all of these, I guess, let's see. My apologies, the system is not best performing, but hopefully it will move to this following page. Okay, here it goes. Is the WAPPS-Hemo testing center. A lot of activity. Yeah, late in the evening, all what was needed was okay. So this is the one I've just created. And I see here a few things that I'll check. First of all, the half-life was estimated at 10 hours. The expected for an individual that age, that blood group was 10.5. So exactly where it should be. I can see the time to concentration. I can see information about the previous infusion. I can actually see all the infusion information, exactly how we input it there. And sometimes we realize that there were mistakes and we send message to correct them. I can go here and write a message. I have a lot of preset messages, or I can write free texts like, you know, good job, well done. Now I can see the final report. I can click here and have a preview of what the patient will see, what the doctor will see, the infusion information, the graph, just the pre-dose and the peak. There's you see the confidence interval around it, pretty wide, because it's only 1 point. And then I can scroll down the line, and the concentration at 12 hours is estimated at 30%, at 24 hours, 14%. This is the one measured at 41, which is the 5. Sorry, the predicted at 41 hours is 5%, and so on. I see the half-life, 10.5. There's also a conservative estimate and an optimistic estimate. Since it's a prediction, there are confidence interval around the value. So the half-life is 10%, but it could be as short as 8, as long as 13. And that's because we are estimating, and there are confidence interval. We are trying to educate people that there is no certainty. There is there are estimates around that. Okay, let me try to see how I can go back here. Okay, so now when I can use other models. I could remodel with a different model. I could reject this PK. I could say this is not good to use for improving the models, and so on. But in most cases, the study is well done. I just release it. When I release it, by accepting it, this is moved onto the queue of those ready to be released. We park them here so that we have a chance for a second thought. When I approve them in the queue, now the user received an email saying, oh, the PK you requested is now ready. And indeed, if you are patient, I go out as myself, I go back in with the test user, and the patient was Michael test 2. And now we have a PK with plasma derived that was done in July. This is the one we just added, and the user can view it. So click on view and sees exactly what we have just seen on the other side. And this can be downloaded as a PDF. And if you do download, it will generate a PDF that you can save, print, give to the patient, add to your hospital system, and it will go where the PDF goes, depending your browser. In my browser, it goes here, and this is the PDF. Can you still see the screen?
Yes.
I guess so. Yeah, so this is the PDF. It does exactly the same. It's a very rough PDF. It's signed by myself because I've been the one releasing this PK. And all the information that was released is here on this piece of paper. Let me go back to the WAPPS. But this is only the beginning, because, telling the patient that his half-life is 10 hours doesn't really help a lot. Telling them that they are safe for maybe 36 hours when they get to 6% is useful. But what is really useful is to move to the clinical calculator and tell them, okay, you have a chance of, you can go back to a PK after a year. The age will be different. Maybe the patient is now heavier, lighter. You can change body weight, height, and the PK will be adjusted. But what you do here, you say, okay, you are on 2,500 every third day. And what this does, it simulates what the profile is for this patient with their own individual PK, taking 2,500 every third days. And this will be, and if you go down here, you see that the peak will be about 1, and the trough will be about, the peak will be about 100%, 9.99. The trough will be about 1%, 0.01. And the patient will use about little less than 6,000 per week, because it is 2,500 every third day. It will be all the time above 1%, 68% above 3%, and 31% above 15%. Now, why 1, 3, and 15? Well, I don't know. these are the value we have decided back when we created WAPPS. You'll see later that we can change these values, but this gives you some idea that, you know, for 1/3 of the time, the patient is a very safe area. For most of his time, the patient is above 3%, so good protection. And is never below 1%. Now, this patient may tell you, you know what, I'm bored of doing every 3 days. Can we do, and I forget infusion, it comes always on a different day. Can we try, move to, say, twice a week, increasing the dose when the interval is longer? Have a look here, it was 100%, 68, 31. Now, the patient would like to be on a irregular with variable dose and say he wants on a Monday to take 2,500 and on a Thursday to take 3,500. We see some patient on regimen like this because, you know, Monday is only 3 days and 3 days we have seen is good. And then to cover the 4 days, we give 1,000 units more. And I can calculate this one as well. I could save all of these and then compare them. Now I'm just showing you what happened. And you see the graph. This is the Monday. And this is the Thursday with the higher dose, higher peak. The first peak is about 100%. The second peak is 140%. But unfortunately, the patient in 4 days goes below 1%, no matter the higher dose. And this case, he uses a little bit more. He has not full coverage. The time above 3% went down from 68 to 61, and the time above 15 stays about 30. It was 33, now it's 30. So not a good idea. Now, we have found this very powerful when you talk to patients, particularly mom of little children, insisting to use more or to, you know, tweak the regimen. Why don't we try this? We can try, but this patient very likely will bleed there. And that's not a good idea in this specific case. Okay, now let's go back to the patient. Okay, now we'll go back to the treatment in a second. To show you how you can activate myWAPPS, give it to the patient, collect data. But before we go there, I want to show you a couple more things you can do with WAPPS. So once you have more than one infusion, say the patient comes back every year, and year after year, you accumulate, you put in your data, 1 point here, 2 points there, then you want to do an overall PK, you can do a merge of the PK studies. Now, he will tell you, you have 3. Of course, if I choose Advait, I will have nothing more to merge because I have only 1 study. But if I instead choose the one plasma derived, since I have another, he will tell me, okay, which one you want to merge? These 2. Great. Next. It puts all the points that were in the 2 PK together. I have 2 baseline. I have, you know, 2 hour, 3 hour, I have a 24, a 48. I can delete some. So, you know, if I don't want to use 2 baseline, I can take 1 out, but then I can merge all of this. And the system will do for me a new PK where I have all the information from the other study. And I can again request the PK and get a new study. This is very useful with children, because I can use 3 points taken after 3 different PKs. I record them individually, then I do a merge, and I use that set for estimation. The other thing I can do is add a validation set. You know, I've showed you that there is some variability in the estimate. There is some variability there. So, you know, I may want to check how precise the estimate is, and I can add a validation set. What is a validation set? A validation set, I have to decide what I'm trying to validate. Let's say my patient is on plasma derived right now, so the one I want to validate is plasma derived, and the patient comes to clinic. I can't select the factor this time, is there. He asked me when the patient infused. So let's say the patient infused today, actually, let's say yesterday, infused yesterday, the 30th of August at, I don't know, 9 a.m. and came to clinic in the afternoon at 3 p.m. for a visit. And during that visit, here is the validation point. During that visit, we took a sample. So was on the 30th of August, was 3 p.m. And let's say that sample was measured at, I don't know, I'm just guessing, 45%. Okay. Okay. Now I have my validation point. Patient at 6 hours was 45%. I can ask the system to validate, which is comparing the prediction at 6 hours out of the PK with my measurement at 6 hours. This time there is no human. Oh, it asked me if I know when the patient gave the previous infusion. Let's say I don't know, I skip. It tells me, is this patient on this regimen? Let's say unknown, just to do a very simple validation. So I'm saying, no, I only know that he had that 6%. I don't have any other information. And now I ask to validate. There is no human being involved here. Now the system will compare, will calculate based on the current weight, the infusion time. It might have been a different dose, doesn't matter. The system does compare the measurement with the prediction using the PK of the patient, the dose that was given, the time that were given. And it tells me, okay, done, check it. And now I can view the validation result. And the validation result is this one. It tells me what you measured was 45%. The prediction was 49%. So actually the prediction was more optimistic than the true measure. So there was a over prediction of about 5%, which anyways fell within the confidence interval. The confidence interval for the prediction was 0.40, from 40% to 61%. So my 45% measure was within the confidence interval, was close to the prediction, but was not exactly there. From a statistical viewpoint, is within the confidence interval, so the system has no concern. Otherwise, you would have seen a red X here saying, no, this prediction was bad. Your measurement tells that something is wrong. In this case, it says, no, it's in the confidence interval, so it's good. Now it asks me to make a clinical judgment. It says, now that you know that the measure is 45% and not 49%, as I predicted, if you go here, you see that what was the measured and what was the estimated. It shows you side by side. Now that you know that there is this difference, does it make any clinical difference? Will you change the treatment plan for the patient? Now, honestly, 45 or 49 is in the measurement error of my lab, and they are both protective. So no, I'm not changing in this case. So my answer would be no, this is not clinically relevant. The moment I say no, I will have an updated estimate. Until I make my judgment, I will not be able to see the updated estimate. Sorry, I should have showed you. Before I did click here, this was great. Now that I said no, even if I had said yes, no problem. Yes, I will change my patient. It now shows me the updated estimate. What is the updated estimate? Is the PK now including also the validation point. And it tells me that now the half-life is 10.5, 8.5, 13. while the original PK, the original PK was 10.5. Well, in this case, there's no change. And there's no change because really that point still fell within the confidence interval, so it does not add information. If this point was very much outside, then I would have had changes here. So my sense that this is not changing practice is still here. You see, this is the new point, is added there, and it doesn't change. Now, if I go to the calculator now, the calculator will ask me, do you want to use the updated PK for the patient treatment regimen? And if I say yes, it will use the updated one. If I say no, it will use the original. So the validation point helps me understand how good the prediction is for that patient without any intervention of the WAPPS team. And then I can use or not that extra point for working with the patient. Now, what if I want to activate my WAPPS? To activate my WAPPS, I need to create a treatment plan. I have PK studies for a patient, but I also have treatment plans. So I could create a treatment plan going in the calculator, putting in the dose that the patient wants to be on and so on. Or in this case, the patient is on this treatment plan here, is on 2,500 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Let's do like this. Let's create a treatment plan. So let's go into the PK we have just done. Go to the clinical calculator. Now, I can use this calculator in many ways. I could say, okay, I want this patient to be above 3%. And I want this patient to infuse on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Which dose do I need to give him for them to be always above 3%? And the calculator will make a suggestion which tells you can't do that because on the 4-day interval, you would need to use a 10,000 unit dose, which you can't do, which is useful for understanding what you can, you cannot. 2,000 would be enough for the 2 days interval, but on the 3 days interval, no matter how much you go up, you would still get a very low trough. But I could ask the calculator to tell me what the dose is for infusing this patient every second day to get a trough of 5%. And I don't know what the answer will be, is that the patient needs to infuse with about 4,000 units. With 4,000 units every other day, the patient would have a peak of about 1.5 and a trough of 5%. 100% of time above 3%. Weekly dose 13,000. So I can create a treatment plan. Doesn't matter which one. When I'm happy with the treatment plan, I'll save it. And now this will be available. And once I have a treatment plan, I can go back to the patient. And now I can select, you see, here is the one we made up now, about 4,000 units every second day, trough of 5, peak of 1.5. I select one plan as the active plan. And the active plan is the one that is moved on to myWAPPS. Now, I don't want to change this plan for this patient, even if it's a test center. I'm not sure if someone is using this. So let me leave this plan that was there already on Advait 3 times a week. In the app setting, the only thing I have to do is put the patient email and select an app. In this case, the only app I have available is myWAPPS. And then I select the threshold. So usually we use green down to 15%, yellow down to 3. But I might say, no, for this patient, I want yellow only to 30. It does a lot of physical activity or he bleeds easily, and I want the red warning to start at 10%. I can move this cursor, and this will determine when WAPPS change color, myWAPPS change color on the screen and send warning to the patient and so on. Or I can put it back, which is possibly better in this case, at 15 and 0.3. And as a doctor, again, I don't need to consent the patient, but I take responsibility here for explaining to the patient what myWAPPS does, how to use it. And I also make a judgment that the patient is able to understand what he's doing. I don't know who this patient is. The doctor that is activating the app for them is able to make the judgment. Again, we don't need any paperwork, but we need someone to take responsibility for deciding that the patient can use the app. I will show you what the app does in a second, but if the patient uses the app to see their predicted concentration, they input their infusion, and their infusion comes back to WAPPS. And you see this patient has collected over 10 pages of infusions, and I have them listed here, so I could go back and check when he infused and how much, and if he was adherent or not. But better than looking at the list, we have connected an external dashboard. Now, for some reason today, this connection, if I click here, I can't go to the dashboard. So I'm not using this link to the dashboard. I go back on the patient list and I go to the dashboard through here. I would go in the same place. Apologies, but the other one, for some reason today, does not work. This is our patient. If I go to the dashboard, I'm moving to an external system, and the first time I move to that system, I also have to, agree to use it. Be patient for a second. Okay, here is the dashboard. Now, this patient was on holidays like I was and did not record any infusion in August. Okay, if I look at the 12 months average, these are their performance. In 12 months, this patient would have had 156 infusion. He actually recorded 31, which means he has a 20% adherence, looks red, is not a good patient, and he spent 7% of time between 3 and 15, 8% of time above 15. So not really doing that much well. Now, if I look at a month like September 2020 for this patient, let me pull it up here. September 2020, he made 10 out of 13 infusion. So he was 77% adherent here. He infused 25,000 units that month. And I have all the infusion. Here he recorded that he did some sport. He had a bleed on September 10. I can see all of this graphically here. That's the month of September. And you see the infusion, the levels. These are the day infused. These are the 2 bleeds he got. And this is the note he recorded. Again, it's a very simple dashboard. We are working on improving it, but our user seems to be quite happy with having this as a tool to monitor their own patient. Of course, I can go, I can explore months one by one. So in October, he did slightly worse already. He was infusing less, 9 in 13, 79%, but he didn't bleed, and so on. And I can also have average over different periods. So, 6 months, 3 months. Over the last 3 months, he did not collect enough data to do any statistical assessment. And of course, once you are in the dashboard, you can move from one patient to another of your tests, and you see how many infusion they did. Now, there are not a lot of patients. This is, again, test patient. If I show you my center, there are patients with thousands of infusion that they accumulate using myWAPPS. Let me show you for a second. myWAPPS, I have an iPhone, so I took screenshot of an iPhone, but you would have a similar icon on an Android device. So you download the app. You need a doctor to activate it for you. You give the email, then you receive an email. You have to go through an activation as a patient. You have to consent to the use. You have to create your own password and so on. But then it's an app like another. Once you have activated, it loads up and it has a few functions. It shows you your predicted level. It shows you your treatment plan. It has a calendar view. It lets you estimate your future concentration. You can change some settings. This is sponsored by Bayer. Is a unrestricted grant. They don't have any access to data. They don't have any input in what we do. We acknowledge that creating the myWAPPS app was made possible by this unrestricted grant. This is how the level shows. So you have the curve and you see green down to 15, then yellow, then red, and you can move this point back and forth on the graph, and you will see concentration in the future or in the past. You can record an infusion. If you don't record infusion, you don't see predicted concentration. Now, here in Canada, for example, the patient record infusion on CBDR and infusion is passed on to myWAPPS. We are connecting a few patient app, but if there is no patient app available, the patient can record the infusion directly on myWAPPS. And it's very simple. You put the dose, you put the date and the time, and that's it. You can have a calendar view with the day where you will need to infuse circled, the day where you infused in blue, current date in squared blue or green, I don't know how you see it, and the day with bleeds in red. Essentially, what I see on the dashboard on my side, the patient sees on their side. They can extract data and send them by email to themselves, to their doctor, to a printer. We are working on creating reports that can be used for those having to provide accountability to insurance companies and so on. So it's a very simple app again. It gives the patient a sense of protection, which level they are at, and it gives their doctor a lot of information through the infusion they record. Okay, let me go back to WAPPS. And let me check if I have left anything out. I think I've covered almost everything. Sorry, our patient was this one, Michael Test 2. So I covered the treatment plan, the app setting, the patient infusion, the dashboard. Within the PK study page, we looked at the PK layout. Of course, even this one, you can, yes, download the PDF. You can go in the clinical calculator. We have gone there. You can create a treatment plan. That one, you can again, you can create a, sorry, now I logged out for some reason. You can create a PDF of a treatment plan and hand it over to the patient. Let's see if I go back to the treatment plan and I take this one that we created. I can view it and I can create a PDF of the treatment plan. And if I'm successful, yes, here. Now I have a PDF where I have the input, I have the graph, I have the dose, the frequency, the thresholds, and I can hand it over to the patient. Yeah, no, I think I've covered essentially everything.